This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libya's Haftar orders troops to fight harder during Ramadan despite calls for truce. South Africa heads to the polls on Wednesday in a race that could test the ruling ANC's long-held dominance. And Sudan's military council set to publish its vision for the country's transitional period. You're watching Africa Live. A warm welcome from Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at other stories lined up this hour. Tunisia's annual inflation falls to 6.9% in April. And in sports, Arsenal's top four hopes are over after being held at home against Brighton in the English Premier League. Libya's East Commander Khalifa Haftar is urging his troops to intensify their fight for Tripoli. Haftar says the holy Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, which started on Monday, was a month of jihad or holy war. The call comes hours after the UN called for a week-long ceasefire in the capital Tripoli.
Forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar are battling militias allied with the UN-supported government in Libya's capital, Tripoli. Haftar has called on his forces to step up the fight, saying the month of Ramadan, which has just begun, is a month of holy war.
Our battles against terrorism in the past in Benghazi and Derna did not stop for the holy month of Ramadan, but increased our determination and strength during this holy month. Officers and soldiers in our armed forces and the support forces, I salute you during these glorious days and urge you with your strength and determination to teach the enemy a greater and bigger lesson than the previous ones.
The call comes hours after the UN appealed for truce starting Monday morning. It's not yet clear if any of the rival factions had agreed to the truce. Prime Minister Faiz al-Sarraj has, however, expressed willingness to hold dialogue and fighting in the past.
The LNA forces should end their operations and return to their place. Hence, talks about how to resume the political process might start. These fierce attacks have inflicted serious injuries on civilians, damaged infrastructure, schools, bookshops, bombed ambulances, residential neighborhoods and airports.
Meanwhile, war-displaced families are seeking shelter in Tripoli schools.
I stayed 5 days under bombardment. I did not find any way to get out of the house. The tanks were everywhere in front of the house. Thank God we reached Tripoli. Unfortunately, we didn't find a place to stay. But an honorable man showed us this school. We came here and we were welcomed.
We are here to serve about 24 families with about 158 children, from infants to 15 years old. We provide all kinds of services from psychological aid, social support, entertainment to skills improvement for everyone here.
The UN estimates that around 50,000 people have been displaced since Haftar launched his offensive to take Tripoli in early April. Chom Hono, CGTN.
All right, let's get more now on this. We're joined live from Cairo by CGTN's Yasser Hakim. Yasser, it appears there is no end in sight for the ongoing conflict in Libya, more so now that Haftar has called for more attacks in the month of Ramadan.
Yes, and he obviously in his call, he said that in previous years, in the attack on Derna, when he took over of also Benghazi, it was during the month of Ramadan. So Ramadan would not be the month that would deter the forces from continuing their war. He also gave examples in history whereby for different wars that has been won during Ramadan, and he gave an example of the 1973 Egyptian war on Israel to free Sinai from Israeli occupation, and he said that was during Ramadan as well, and that he also, I think, wants to avert or not give any chance to the other forces to use any ceasefire to reorganize themselves or receive more military aid or so forth during the ceasefire. So he's continuing at the moment, and the attacks have increased in the south of Tripoli, and trying to enter and take over this part of Tripoli at the beginning before continuing into the rest of the city.
So what's been the reaction there, Yasser, to Haftar's call, both from authorities and the locals?
There's no reaction from Cairo yet, although obviously last month Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had met with Khalifa Haftar in Cairo, and Haftar said after the meeting that Egypt supports the steps taken by Haftar in Libya and his war against terrorism, as he called it, and against the militants and militias, extremist militias in Libya. And therefore, even if Egypt does not announce any comments or any reaction, it would be a sign of approval or support to Khalifa Haftar's continuing war in Libya.
All right, so let's focus on Egypt now, Yasser. And the country recently extended its state of emergency as fighting rages on in Libya, and with fears militants might step up attack during the month of Ramadan. How are Egyptian authorities waiting for any possible security threat?
Yes, there's been a heightened security for the month of Ramadan, especially that during the month Egyptians go to different places to celebrate after iftar. At the evenings there are hangouts and different places where Egyptians spend the iftar and suhoor at night, and they are usually full of Egyptians in the evening, and these areas have all been heightened security, and also around churches and mosques. Obviously, you've seen what happened in Sri Lanka in the last month, and Egypt does not want to repeat that in Egypt. There's also a crackdown on rented houses, and that's new. According to the new law, if you rent a house, you have to inform authorities of the people who have rented the house and submit a copy of the ID. And that's because in most of the cases in the previous terrorist attacks, authorities discovered that the terrorists would rent an apartment close to the attack location, and they would leave weapons inside, and the owner of the house would not know who they are, or would be considered a partner in the crime. And now, if a person does not inform authorities that he has rented a house to someone, he would be considered a partner in crime and could be put in jail. And therefore, this has been increased now after the new extended emergency law. And this is just one part of a lot of procedures to try to avert or avoid any terrorist attacks in the coming month.
All right, Yasser, thank you for that update. Yasser Hakim live in Cairo. Now, 2 days to D-Day in South Africa, political parties have been making their final push for votes. A record number of voters have registered for the 8th May 2019 general election. CGTN's Ulisa Njamela reports.
It's just 2 days before South Africans go to the polls, and all political parties came out in full force this weekend to convince eligible voters to choose their parties. More than 26 million South Africans are expected to take to the polls on Wednesday in what has been dubbed one of the most highly contested elections in this country. Thousands of the African National Congress supporters filled up the 62,000 capacity Ellis Park Stadium for the governing party's final rally. Geared up in party colors, the supporters packed the stadium in a tangible show of force. The rally is held under the banner of Siyanqoba, which means we are conquering.
It's a decisive moment in our country, in the history of South Africa. This is a moment when we must choose between the past and the future. This is a moment where we must choose to return to a path of conflict and anger, of corruption and also hunger, or we can choose to embark on a path of renewal and go forward to a future of peace, stability, jobs, and progress.
Ramaphosa's address focused mainly on the intense campaign trail and public concerns voiced during the door-to-door events.
Our people want better service delivery. They have been protesting, and rightly so, because they want a better life. Our people want better service delivery. They want clean water. They want sanitation. They want houses. They want better roads. They want land to farm. And they want us to deal with criminals. They want us to eliminate drugs. And they want us to stop the abuse of women and children. And so today, comrades, as the ANC, we say to the people of South Africa, we have heard you.
Ramaphosa also focused on socio-economic improvements spearheaded by the ANC government, but also admitted that the ANC government is not perfect and that it has made mistakes. The ANC is facing a tough challenge from opposition parties. The parties are emboldened by the governing party's decline in the electoral support in the 2016 local government elections. But the former liberation movement is expected to retain its majority. The Economic Freedom Fighters, the third largest party in the country, is expected to grow its support in the upcoming polls, while some election poll predictions indicate that the second largest political party here, the Democratic Alliance, might lose some support. Both parties also held their final rallies this weekend. Yulisa Njomela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's get more now from CGTN's Robert Nagila. He's live for us in Durban. Robert, just 48 hours before South Africans go to the polls, give us an update on the mood and atmosphere there.
Well, you're absolutely right. About 48 hours before that big day, voting commences. However, here in Durban, where we are at this particular moment, one would be hard-pressed to actually believe that we're about 48 hours to an election. It's business as usual. It's a Monday. There's traffic on the roads. Businesses are open and people going about their usual business. However, voting has already kicked off. There's what we call special voting, or the special vote, which caters for those who've registered and are unable to go and cast their ballots at their registered polling stations. So they're allowed to vote today, Monday, and tomorrow on the eve of the election. And then the rest of the country will then participate in the voting process on Wednesday.
All right, Robert, so let's talk about the key issues: security, corruption, inequality. They seem to be some of the major talking points in the campaigns. What are the party candidates saying?
Well, to understand, you need to look at it from two different perspectives, that of the ruling party ANC and that of the opposition parties. Now remember, you've got about 50 political parties or so taking part in this particular election. They've been accusing the ruling party of mismanaging the direction this country is supposed to be taking, mismanaging the economy, of rampant corruption, of inequality, and they say that it's time for change. Now, the ruling party says, and this going by what President Cyril Ramaphosa said at the last rally held in Johannesburg on Sunday, yesterday, where he admitted that the ruling party had made mistakes in the past when it came to issues such as dealing with rampant corruption, state capture, the inequalities witnessed. At the same time, however, saying that, look, the ANC, the ruling party, is best placed to tackle these issues. So urging his supporters and voters to come out in large numbers and vote for them. But those are the main issues that South Africans have been talking about for the last few months, actually last few years as well. Corruption, rampant corruption, which they accuse the ruling party of not doing enough to tackle it, in some cases of taking part in it. The ruling party saying, look, yes, admitting there is corruption, but they are best placed to deal with this issue and other issues that are underlying problems and have been on the agenda on the political campaign circuit in the last few months. Peninah?
All right, Ruba, thank you for that. Ruba Nagila live in Durban. To Sudan now, where the country's military council is set to publish its vision for the country's transitional period. An opposition alliance already submitted a draft constitutional document relating to institutions and arrangements of the transitional period. The military council spokesperson welcomed the document but stated negotiations were ongoing. Protesters still continue to demand a civilian-led transitional government. But as Ramadan starts, organizers are faced with a unique problem. Ramadan requires Muslims to fast from sunrise to sunset for a 30-day period. Organizers are planning ahead as they look to continue their sit-in.
The feeling of Ramadan, as well as the fact that the revolution is happening during Ramadan, people want to maintain that. This makes us feel more of a responsibility. Donations have tripled, and this shows you how people felt that it was necessary to provide food for those who are at the sit-in. For the last 2 days, we sent out groups to the market to buy plates. Before, we would give out food gradually throughout the day, but in Ramadan, you need to feed everyone at one time.
Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court's Appeals Chamber has ruled that former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir is not entitled to head of state immunity. The chamber also overturned the pre-trial chamber's decision to refer Jordan to the UN Security Council for not arresting Bashir during his visit to the country. Jordan is party to the Rome Statute, an international treaty established by the ICC. The appeals chamber found Jordan had failed to comply with statute by not arresting Bashir, ruling he was not entitled to head of state immunity. However, according to the decision, Jordan's non-compliance was not grounds for referral to either the UN Security Council or the ICC's Assembly of States Parties. Waiting a short break here on Africa Live, and we come back. DRC Ebola death toll climbs to 1,008 as insecurity continues to hamper efforts to curb the spread. And relief agencies struggle to reach remote villages of Mozambique days after Cyclone Kenneth makes landfall.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed, and this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
DR Congo's health ministry says the number of Ebola-related deaths has now surpassed 1,000 people. Efforts to counter the outbreak continue to be hampered by violent conflict in the east of the country. According to the Congolese health ministry update last Friday, there have been a total of 1,529 cases reported, with 1,463 confirmed and 66 probable. So far, there has been a record of 1,008 deaths. The World Health Organization says the risk of global spread is low. However, neighboring countries continue to stay alert. Butembo and Katwa districts in North Kivu province remain hotbeds of contagion, with Katwa accounting for more than half of all new cases. We're now joined here in studio by Nicole Peninah. She is the Ebola virus disease coordinator for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent here in Africa, to give us more insight into this outbreak in the DRC. Nicole, thank you very much for joining us. So we know that insecurity has been a major impediment for health workers there in the DRC, but just give us an idea of some of the other major challenges they're facing.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Peninah, for having us and bringing attention to this important issue. It's really critical to know that this is the second worst outbreak globally of Ebola that we're seeing. And not only is this the second worst outbreak, but it's in a very challenging context. So it's in a region with long-standing conflict, population movement, outbreak to measles, cholera, and on top of that, an outbreak of Ebola. And so this does present an operational challenge for frontline workers who are hearing from the community. They're not understanding that Ebola is real, and they're not understanding that people with symptoms need to go to an Ebola treatment center. And this is really critical why we need to bring awareness to this issue at the community level, but also so that others understand this is still an ongoing outbreak.
You know, that's a really intriguing point you brought up, Nicole, that there are people who still do not believe that Ebola really does exist in the DRC. So what does that say? Is it that awareness campaigns are not effective enough? And if so, then what are you doing to counter that?
Yeah. Good question. So let's first take it from our own perspective. If there was an outbreak in our own communities and we see healthcare workers coming in, the personal protective equipment, the full suits, and taking away our loved ones outside of a traditional burial practice, we would be scared and we would have questions, and we may even see resistance. And so this is why the community messaging and involving the community at the center of the response is so important. For example, some of the ways we do this is by making sure we're constantly in communication with the communities, hearing their concerns, understanding, for example, why they don't feel the need to go to an Ebola treatment center. We hear this is because they see their family and loved ones go there to die rather than to get treatment. But equally understanding that we need to be involving Ebola survivors, for example, to explain and show this messaging to the community that this is real, and to encourage the community themselves to build a response to Ebola.
All right. And so we've had the World Health Organization saying that this risk of it spreading to other countries is not really as high. But then we're also seeing bordering countries such as Zambia taking precautionary measures to counter a possible spread. What is your assessment of the risk of this virus spreading to the neighboring countries?
Yes, so there is a risk of the virus spreading to the nearby countries. We see this with the trends in the data, as you mentioned earlier. We're now at over 1,500 cases and sadly over 1,000 deaths. But we also see this by observing population movement trends across the border, and as well having porous borders. So this is impacting Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, and South Sudan. And this is exactly why our volunteers and staff are working at the critical points of entry along the border, but also working with communities on community-based practices. For example, what we've seen in DRC is that at the beginning of the response, a low number of communities were reporting alerts of Ebola symptoms and Ebola deaths. But now we see that it's over 81%. And this is the change we need to see. And this is what we're adapting in the nearby countries, as mentioned, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, and South Sudan. And then following it up with community-based surveillance, so making sure communities understand where to report this.
All right. Just a very quick question. I know my news director will really crack me up, but I'm really worried about or concerned about the violence in the DRC, because I know that then creates a situation where people flee from their homes and go to other places to seek refuge. Are you able to reach such people?
So as we mentioned earlier, this is an operational challenge, and this is why it's critical that we're building the response at the community level. All partners are understanding that this needs to happen, but our 1,500 volunteers working in DRC are from the communities, and they're responding with their communities, and this gives us different access where we are able to reach these communities, though we can't forget that there are operational challenges.
All right, Nicole, it's a pleasure having you in studio. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks
in
so
studio
much.
with us, Nicole Fasina, Ebola virus disease coordinator for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent here in Africa. Let's now move to Mozambique, and thousands of people in remote areas of the storm-lashed country have been left homeless. Many small communities have been completely destroyed. Transportation remains a big challenge as relief agencies struggle to reach out to the affected population scattered across villages. Our reporter Daniel Arap Moy is in Pemba and brings us the following report.
Mozambique is currently dealing with the aftermath of Cyclone Kenneth in the country's northern coastal region of Pemba. According to the country's National Institute of Disaster Management, 38 people have so far been confirmed dead. More than 20,000 others are reportedly without proper shelter, with nearly 30,000 homeless. Mario Alima is one among many Mozambicans who have been affected by the devastating effect of Cyclone Kenneth. Halima is trying to rebuild her home after the cyclone, but she says it's a daunting task that requires resources which she does not have.
The floodwater came and filled my entire house, and now we're trying to fix the damage, but it will take time because we don't have much as a family.
Cyclone Kenneth left a trail of destruction here in Pemba. Hundreds of families, just like Halima, are trying to salvage the little left, but resources seem hard to come by. Many people here in Pemba are trying to return to a semblance of daily life amid the destruction, but with nothing much to start with.
I have nothing much left. The cyclone destroyed everything, and with 7 children, life is simply a daily struggle. If anyone can help, I will be grateful.
Many of the roads in the area have been grounded and remains in bad shape, with flights to the region grounded. Relief agencies are concerned about communities they have lost contact with, especially given the challenge of transportation in hard-to-reach areas of Cabo Delgado. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Pemba, Mozambique.
Scientists are investigating a possible connection between the average temperature that people have tea and cases of cancer of the esophagus. The preliminary findings suggest that people in Kenya, particularly in the western region, drink the hottest tea in the world. Researchers believe tea drinkers who like their tea warmer than 60 degrees Celsius are at a higher risk of developing esophageal cancer.
Steaming hot and straight from the pot. This is how many Kenyans like their food. In fact, the hotter, the better.
Most people prefer hot or warm food because this is the cold season. If you eat cold food, it will affect you. But if you eat hot food, you will feel warm and energetic.
In Kenya, hot food is widely believed to be healthier, while cold food is viewed as dull and unsatisfying. But scientists now warn that danger lurks in these popular piping hot meals. For years, researchers have sought to establish the effects of very hot food on the esophagus, the tube through which foods which have been swallowed reach the stomach. A study published in the journal Cancer Epidemiology identified thermal injury from hot food and beverages as a possible cause of esophageal cancer.
It is an irritant, heat. You are causing ulceration of the lining of the esophagus and the throat. And once you cause this constant damage to the lining, it leads to mutation and finally leads to cancer. So it's carcinogenic to cause constant irritation of the mucous lining.
It's bad news for tea drinkers from Kenya's western region, who are among those who take the hottest tea in the world. while investigating the possible link between the temperature at which people consume their food and possible cases of cancer of the esophagus. Scientists found that Kenyans like their tea the hottest, taking it at 72.1 degrees Celsius. Researchers found that tea drinkers who liked their tea to be warmer than 60 degrees Celsius and took more than about 2 large cups daily had a 90% higher risk of developing esophageal cancer.
The ideal temperature is the body temperature, which is about 37 degrees centigrade. Anything above that will be damaging the cells. The cells are designed to survive within the body temperature.
Cancer of the esophagus accounts for 11% of new cancer cases in Kenya. The news has had a jarring effect on tea lovers.
Food should not be too hot or too cold. It should be warm.
But the studies are not conclusive, and researchers suggest that the evidence should be evaluated further. And as scientists seek a conclusive answer across the country, tea lovers grapple with the idea that hotter might not be better after all. Wilkisanyabo, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Palestinian officials say a ceasefire is now in place after the recent flare-up with Israel. They said it began early Monday morning after a deal was reached with Israel to end the latest surge of violence in the Gaza Strip and southern Israel. Israeli officials have not confirmed the agreement, but their military have lifted protective restrictions in place on residents in the south. Fighting erupted 3 days ago with rockets from Gaza killing 4 civilians in Israel. At least 23 Palestinians, including at least 9 militants, were also killed. Meanwhile, 41 people on board a Russian Aeroflot passenger plane have been killed after an emergency landing in Moscow. The tragedy occurred as the jet burst into flames on the runway. The flight took off from Moscow Sunday evening, headed to the northern city of Murmansk. It returned soon later, reportedly due to a loss of communication caused by a lightning strike. Many passengers escaped through the emergency slides after the hard landing. Less than half survived. President Vladimir Putin has expressed condolences. No official cause has been given and an investigation is underway. The United States has deployed a carrier strike group and a bomber task force to the Middle East. It's meant to send a clear message to Iran that any attack on American interests or its allies will be met with unrelenting force. The U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton says the U.S. is not seeking war, but is fully prepared to respond. This is the latest in a series of moves by U.S. President Donald Trump against Iran as tensions continue to escalate between the two countries. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. Tunisia's annual inflation falls to 6.9% in April. And European shares dive as US-China trade tensions escalates.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Tunisia's annual inflation rate has slowed to 6.9% in April from 7.1% in March and 7.3% in February. The country's Reserve Bank raised its key interest rate to 7.75% in February to combat the high inflation rate, the third hike in the past 12 months. Tunisia's economy grew 2.5% in 2018 compared to 1.9% the previous year. The slow growth is attributed to the deterioration of the local currency value, a record deficit of trade balance, drop in foreign currency reserve, and low exports of strategic phosphate. Authorities are working on making a balanced development in a number of regions where unemployment has reached 30%. South African Airways has announced that it will launch direct flights between Johannesburg and Guangzhou in September. This is expected to offer customers access to the heart of China's export-led manufacturing industries. According to the firm, this is a strategic initiative implemented to enhance the route network. This will be the only carrier operating a direct service, providing the shortest travel time on a non-stop basis between the 2 points. Guangzhou, situated in Guangdong province, is the center of China's export-led manufacturing industries and described as the world's manufacturing hub. French energy major Total has reached a binding agreement with Occidental Petroleum to acquire Anadarko assets in Algeria, Ghana, Mozambique and South Africa for $8.8 billion. The firm said the transaction was contingent upon Occidental entering into and completing its proposed acquisition of Anadarko and approval of relevant authorities. Total said the assets represented around 1.2 billion barrels of oil equivalent plus 2 billion barrels of oil equivalent of long-term natural gas resources in Mozambique. It added that despite the capital investment in the Southern African country, the acquisition is expected to be free cash flow positive from 2020. The deal is expected to close in 2020. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that the country will hike tariffs on Chinese goods worth $200 billion from 10% to 25%. Trump expressed lack of progress in the ongoing trade talks between the two countries. The two sides have imposed tariffs on $360 billion in two-way trade since 2018. President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping previously agreed to a truce in December to refrain from further escalation. Trump's latest move will raise duties on more than 5,000 products made by Chinese producers, ranging from chemicals to textiles and consumer goods. Meanwhile, European shares fell sharply after U.S. President Donald Trump ratcheted up trade tensions between the world's largest economies. The U.S. president vowed to hike tariffs on Chinese goods this week, prompting investors to flee riskier assets. Germany's DAX, the most sensitive to China and trade war fears, and France's CAC led declines, down 1.7% and 1.8% respectively. The Pan-European Stock 600 index shed 1.2%, which is its steepest fall in 6 weeks. Frankfurt analyst Robert Halver of Benin Bank said that Trump's tariff threats will create uncertainty among investors and consumers, leading to a further deterioration of the world economic climate.
If the trade war goes into the next round, it means pure uncertainty. Which entrepreneur wants to invest? Who wants to consume? People are keeping their wallets tightly closed. It's like on a farm. If the chickens don't have their peace and quiet, they won't produce any eggs. What is needed is planning security, and this uncertainty ensures that the world economic climate will further deteriorate.
Avengers Endgame is continuing its global domination at the box office in a second week that has seen the blockbuster cross the $2 billion mark in record time. The movie has dethroned Titanic as the second highest grossing film ever worldwide. According to Walt Disney Company, the movie has grossed $145.8 million from North American theaters and $282.2 million internationally, bringing its global total to $2.2 billion. Endgame is one of 5 movies to ever reach that threshold and, not accounting for inflation, is now second worldwide, only to Avatar's $2.8 billion. In a country that loves its warm and hot beverages, beer is one thing most Chinese enjoy cold, and it's been seeing a hot streak as evidenced by national sales figures. The target market in China has gradually shifted to middle and high-end drinkers, with more quality brewed into every sip. CGTN's Gary Engelbrecht reports.
Whether it tastes great or is less filling, China's beer drinkers now want a better brew. In the past, the buzz was all about cheaper domestic brands, but now consumers have more options when buying.
Our previous strategy was to earn the highest sales in the Chinese market, so we would produce a beer that was suitable for most drinkers in China. But now, because young people have new preferences, we develop products according to their tastes.
China Resources Snow Breweries, one of the nation's biggest beer companies, now rolls out new beers specifically for the middle and high-end market. Brave the World Super X, Craftsmanship, and Mars Green are some of their newest brands. At 8 to 15 yuan per bottle, many wonder, has the quality gone up with the price?
We have further designed wheat consistency, alcohol, flavor, taste, and color so that these products will stand out, personalized, and different from the previous ones.
B says CRSB's total income in 2018 increased by almost 8% over the previous year. Total sales of middle and high-end beers have increased nearly 5%, while total sales of traditional cheaper ones decreased 3 to 4%.
It's a trend that every beer company in China should grasp. If they fail to do so, they will lose out in the competition down the road.
While many Chinese enjoy middle and high-end beers at home, at most bars, the cheaper ones remain the life of the party.
Our cheaper beers sell more. The expensive ones are more expensive in the bars, and most people cannot accept the prices.
Yang adds that price is still an essential factor for young people when it comes to buying beer.
The cheaper ones I usually go for. I'm a student, see, so I buy the Tsingtao is pretty cheap. I can usually get a Tsingtao for, up to 5 kwai.
But no matter how China's beer economy plays out, experts agree that more options are always better for consumers. Gary Engelbrandt, CGTN, Beijing.
Still ahead on Africa Live. Egyptians join 1.5 billion Muslims in observing fasts as holy month of Ramadan begins.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
1.5 billion Muslims will begin their month-long fast this week. Ramadan is the holiest month in the Islamic lunar calendar. In Egypt, colorful celebrations are held every year to welcome in the month of devotion and forgiveness. CGTN's Cairo correspondent Adel Mahri has more.
Strings of colored paper have been stretched all over the country as Egyptians prepare to welcome Ramadan. For those who don't know it, it's like 30 days of celebrating Christmas. Ahmed Salah is putting the final touches to his Ramadan lantern. It will decorate the entrance of the garage he works at. His friends have come to help out. To them, it's a joyful task, but more importantly, it's their present to the entire neighborhood.
Decorations are among Ramadan's masters. I have been doing it here at my garage for 5 years and back at home since I was a kid. Back then, the whole family would gather together. Today, I either buy ready-made decorations or if I have time, I gather my friends and we make them together. It's more fun. People then come to admire these decorations and take selfies here.
In Ramadan, Muslims fast is a deprivation from food and drinks from dawn till sunset. When they break their fast, it's usually a meal to share with relatives and friends.
Everything in Ramadan is nice. Ramadan sweets are the best. It's the month when we meet those who have been away for some time. It's the time we put our dispute aside, cook delicious meals and enjoy our company.
And an Egyptian house must be well decorated for these gatherings. It's why business for shop owners like this one booms as the holy month approaches.
I've inherited this job from my grandfather, which he started in 1948.
Ramadan is the best month in the year. It's full of work and sales. These decorations are how people enjoy this month.
I try to preserve the Ramadan spirit I have been raised on, so I get a lot of decorations and set up lights like these in my garden. All my family enjoys it, and they wait for it every year.
In Ramadan, Cairo gets busier at night.
I love Ramadan outings. They start after midnight. Usually with friends, we go to Old Cairo and enjoy outdoor celebrations that are held in this neighborhood.
From sunset till dawn, this is the time people enjoy the most before they start their fast the next day. The Egyptian capital never sleeps. In Ramadan, however, it becomes livelier than ever. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In South Africa, students from 6 universities across the country have been battling it out at a Chinese proficiency competition in Durban. The winners will have the chance to travel to China next month to compete against other global finalists. Let's take a look.
20 of South Africa's best Confucius Institute students entered the 17th Chinese proficiency competition in Durban. The theme for this year's international competition was One World, One Family. For over 4 hours, students demonstrated their skills in writing, a theme speech, and a talent show. Ilse Smit from the University of Johannesburg and Kyle Matthew Nash from the University of Cape Town emerged as the overall winners. In June, they will join other finalists from around the world to compete in China. Its second place was Bozole Bule Shagasi from the Durban University of Technology.
I'm very happy. I mean, you could see the level of Mandarin that they've learned. At least they're able to express themselves.
Confucius Institutes can be found at leading universities across the globe. Here, students can learn Mandarin and gain a deeper understanding of Chinese culture. Astatal, CGTN.
Chirping of birds, sounds of whispering trees, burbling of streams. When sunlight sets the forest's leaves aglow, and waterfall surges down from the mountain, we see and hear the Earth's wondrous beauty. The Earth is meant to be appreciated, and the life of its inhabitants deserves our endless exploration. Come with CGTN to listen and see, in chorus of life, to marvel at nature and life.
所以这我们在第二土语区的话，一定要用到这两个，所以我们是另外把它加进去了，知道没有？啊，这个是送气的，这个是送气，其实都会那么弄的，都可以变动了，但是调号不能够变，如果变了，它意义就不一样了啊。所以一定要记住，所以声母呢，可以变，但是你们就是像你们说的那个狗，我们是。
And coming up in sports, Arsenal's top 4 hopes are over after being held at home against Brighton in the English Premier League.